Adrian Newey disappeared right when Aston Martin needed him the most. That's the story. Aston Martin under pressure. The car looks weak. The team is still searching for answers. And just as the pressure started building, the biggest technical figure wasn't even there. One race earlier, Newey had been publicly addressing Aston Martin's problems. Then the team arrived in China, still under scrutiny, still looking exposed, and suddenly Newey was nowhere to be seen. Now, officially, Aston Martin say this was planned. Mike Krack said there was already a schedule for which races Newey would attend, and that he was never going to be at every round. Fine, but that misses the real point. The issue is not that Newey missed a race. The issue is that he missed this race. That is why people noticed. That is why this became a talking point so quickly. Because when your team looks vulnerable, underperforming, and confused, the last thing you want is your most important technical name missing from the weekend. And whether Aston Martin like it or not, that looks bad. Because in Formula One, presence matters. Not because one person standing in the garage suddenly finds half a second in the car, but because presence sends a message. It tells the paddock that the team knows there's a problem. It tells people that the right figures are fully engaged. It tells fans, rivals, and the media that someone important is directly on top of the situation. So, when Newey is absent at the exact moment Aston Martin need reassurance, leadership, and visible control, the message goes the other way. Even if the presence was always planned, it still feels like terrible timing. And in Formula One, terrible timing becomes terrible optics very quickly. Krack also defended it by saying that in modern Formula One, physical presence matters less because so much can be done remotely. And technically, that's true. A lot of Formula One now works through constant communication, remote analysis, live data, and simulation support. But fans are not asking whether Newey has access to the data. They're asking why Aston Martin's most important technical figure was invisible while the team looked like it was in trouble. That is a completely different question. Remote support may be enough in a technical sense, but symbolically, it feels weak. And Formula One is a sport where symbols matter almost as much as the results. This story also hit harder because Newey is not just another engineer. He is the name people attach to solutions, authority, to confidence, to elite level leadership. So when Aston Martin are struggling and Newey disappears from the weekend, fans do not see that as natural. They see it as a signal. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe it's emotion. But that is how Formula One works. And Aston Martin should know better than anyone. Because if the car had looked competitive in China, none of this would have happened. If Aston Martin had shown strong pace, this story probably dies immediately. Nobody cares who Newey is if the team's performing. But that didn't happen. Instead, Aston Martin's performance did very little to calm this situation. And that is what made the absence bigger. No visible breaks, no obvious relief, no strong result to change the mood. And no Newey. Put those things together, and of course people start asking questions. Now, to be fair, Krack talked about the team finding bugs, understanding energy management better, running more laps in traffic, and adapting to a different tyre generation. So internally, Aston Martin may feel like progress is happening beneath the surface. That may all be true, but from the outside, they still look like a team explaining itself. And once a Formula One team starts looking defensive, every detail gets interpreted in the worst possible way. That is what makes Newey's absence so damaging. Not because it proves something dramatic is happening behind the scenes, but because it feeds a narrative Aston Martin cannot control. Then you add the Honda angle. But this is not just about one missed race. Newey had already spoken about the troubling impact of the Honda power unit alongside Aston Martin's broader performance issues. And that gives this whole story even more weight. Because now it's not just about where Newey was. It becomes a story about whether too many parts of Aston Martin's project are already raising concerns at the same time. The car, the lack of visible progress, the power unit questions, and now the optics of Newey not being there. Each one of those issues on its own is manageable. Together, they start to look like instability. So let's call this what it is. Aston Martin's explanation may be completely true. Newey may have always been shackled to this job. There may be nothing dramatic going on behind closed doors, but it is still that is the real verdict. Because leadership is not only about what is happening internally, it is also about what people see when the pressure is on. And right now, what people saw was Aston Martin struggling, while the one person fans most associate with solving elite technical problems was absent. That is why this story has traction. That is why people are talking about it. That is why this has become more than just a scheduling detail. Everything shifts to Suzuka because that is where the conversation could change very quickly. If Newey is back, maybe this all cools down. If he is not, the noise gets louder immediately. Now, they do not just need improvement. They need confidence. They need visibility. They need control. They need to show that this project is fully on track. Because until they do, Newey missing China will not feel like a harmless absence. It will feel like the moment people start wondering whether Aston Martin's problems are bigger than. So what do you think? Was this completely overblown? Am I being too critical? Or is Newey missing China actually a massive red flag for Aston Martin? Drop your comments below. If you want to, and if you want clear, no bullshit Formula One analysis, subscribe to the All Motorsports podcast because next week we'll see if this pattern holds. Check out more videos here, and I'll see you in the next video.